Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Ostrolenk. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show.
Hey, this is Michael Ostrolenk, and welcome to Steve Shafarman, who's a longtime friend, a very interesting fellow. He spent a lot of time in the health and wellness world. That's what our conversation is tonight. You have another book that you're finishing up, hopefully it'll be out relatively soon. Outgrow Back Pain. It's if I believe, your second book in the kind of the health and fitness space. Yes. Love to talk about both. But before we get into your book coming out and the book you already have out, I'd love to hear more about Steve Shafarman. What led you into the work that you presently do now, and what's kind of the paradigm you're trying to shift in the world with your work and your books and your workshops and stuff?
Well, I'm glad you used the word paradigm, which is often misused, and I feel that what I'm doing is truly a new paradigm for health, fitness, healing, and exercise. I met Moshe Feldenkrais not long after I graduated from college with a degree in philosophy and psychology. And for people who don't know, Moshe Feldenkrais was an Israeli engineer, mathematician, neuroscientist, and judo master. He was a genius in the opinion of almost everyone who knew him. In the 1930s, he spent his days as an assistant to Frederick Joliot-Curie when Joliot won the Nobel Prize. And he spent his evenings as a co-founder of the Judo Club of Paris. And his wife during those years was a pediatrician. So he began to synthesize his understandings of physics and mechanics with watching babies and how they move, with seeing his judo master from Japan and seeing that his judo master moved like a healthy child. That is, it's working harmoniously, no excess effort, aligning always with gravity, breathing fully integrated. And if you think about it, young children are remarkably strong and flexible, have superb stamina and resilience, and they're not doing push-ups or sit-ups or yoga or bench presses or any other formal exercise. So the question is, what do they do? How do they do it? And the answer, his answer and mine, is that they naturally move efficiently. But the vast majority, 99.99% of adults, have lost that innate skill, mostly from neglect and miseducation. We were socialized to sit still and stand up straight. We were taught exercises that isolate individual muscles or parts of the body. And so I call my work now FlexAware to indicate that it goes beyond Feldenkrais. The Feldenkrais Method, as most people teach it, is renowned for being somewhat slow and subtle. And what I saw in the 80s and 90s while writing my first book, which is called Awareness Heals, and it's about Shay and the method. While writing Awareness Heals, I began to see that most of the people who were coming to me for back pain and neck and shoulder injuries were telling me that they hurt themselves at the gym, that they had injuries doing yoga too forcefully or weightlifting or on treadmills. I had a very good friend who you also knew very well who actually died falling off a treadmill. Whether he fell or had a heart attack or what happened, but he was healthy when he got up that morning and his partner found him dead on the floor. Treadmills, walking on treadmills is very different than normal walking. And the real problem, and this is something that Feldenkrais talked about a lot, and that is really fundamental to all of my thinking, is that whenever we're too goal-oriented, that impairs our general awareness. Whenever too focused on something we want to achieve or some part of the body, we're generally unaware of what's happening elsewhere. And so the first book I wrote about Feldenkrais was called Awareness Heals and came out in 1997.
Let me ask you, just so the audience can understand your kind of upgrade and distinction between the original Feldenkrais method and what you've developed.
Yes.
Can you walk us through just so briefly, like what the Feldenkrais method is, the paradigm that it operates from, and then like how you've modified it to recognize its limitations and expand the thinking through your present day work?
That's a good question to help me stay focused. Moshe really wanted to create conditions to evoke or elicit in his students the experience of being like a young child and learning to be more aware and skillful. And by temperament and for philosophical reasons, he was always reluctant to tell people exactly what to do. What I was seeing in the 80s and 90s is that in our modern world, most people don't have the time and patience to do enough conventional Feldenkrais to really get the full benefits of it.
And what is conventional Feldenkrais? Like what honestly, it takes longer than what you offer, but what would someone do in this session?
Standard Feldenkrais lesson, and in my book, Awareness Heals, I present 6 basic lessons. We would systematically go through a range of movements and variations, all leading up to a sense that even the smallest movement involves the whole person.
Yeah.
A small movement of your hand or one finger or turning your head involves some activity at the pelvis and hip joints. And what I'm doing with FlexAware is teaching that much more explicitly, and uniquely in FlexAware, I guide people to really be attentive to your breathing. So people talk about yoga or Tai Chi or Pilates as mind-body exercises. With FlexAware, every movement is coordinating with inhaling or exhaling. So you have to be aware of how you're breathing. And that's the idea that I was leading to with the title Awareness Heals. And that's the reason I call the new approach FlexAware, to emphasize that awareness is the key to flexibility. Awareness is the key to strength. Strength and flexibility are really interrelated, because in order to be strong, muscles have to be able to relax fully and lengthen fully. And for any muscles to do that, opposite muscles have to be doing the reverse. Again, that's how young children naturally move, and that's what leads to real strength and real skill. And that's what we see in great dancers and martial artists and people.
I say martial artists, yeah. Right.
And
yeah.
I, again, was a judo master and co-founder of the Judo Club of Paris. And again, what we are taught in our modern world and our modern systems of exercise is to focus on individual muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Example I often cite is push-ups. People think, oh, great exercise for the arms and shoulders, got to build up the guns, as they say in the gym. And I'm saying, yes, but your brain is smarter than you are. And while you're focusing on your arms and shoulders, you're also conditioning rigidity throughout the trunk and hip joints.
Mm-hmm.
While doing push-ups, it's almost necessary to hold the breath. Again, the whole structure of push-ups is the rigidity of the trunk. Well, as I like to tell my students, you'll have plenty of time to be rigid after you're dead.
Very true.
Up until then, I want you to be lithe and supple like a healthy child, and I want you to be lithe and supple when you're in your 90s and beyond. And the idea with FlexAware is to have specific ways to practice easy, efficient, comfortable movement. So the new book, so as you know from our mutual acquaintance, I had a number of setbacks in launching FlexAware and with the business. But a few years ago, I began actively looking again at what would be the most powerful point of leverage for introducing these new ideas. And these ideas truly are a paradigm shift, looking at the whole person dynamically, looking at how mind and body and relating to other people in the physical environment are really inseparable, except in ones. So a few years ago, actually with the onset of COVID, I began thinking that perhaps the most powerful point of leverage for presenting these ideas is not in terms of fitness and strength, but back pain. Because so many people have back pain and the conventional therapies are generally ineffective. And so the title of the new book that I hope to have out in August or September is Outgrow Back Pain.
Outgrow. So why outgrowing? That's really interesting word to use.
Grow pain is that if we look at the way young children learn to walk, and how as they learn to walk, they outgrow crawling and leave it behind. I'm saying that at any age, you can learn to be more aware and skillful.
Wow. Okay.
Back pain, outgrow asthma, outgrow arthritis, outgrow knee and hip problems. To leave behind by promoting healing through easy, efficient movement.
So learning to move as we evolve to move over time.
Yes.
Not the way industrial world has taught us to. Now the information age has taught us about our bodies and movement.
Yes. We were trained to think of the body as a kind of machine, and you have to work the individual parts. And the new paradigm is to really look at the whole person and to see that muscles are not separate parts, but muscle is a dynamic system. Muscle, bone, tendon, ligament, and cartilage are a dynamic system, and shifts anywhere involve changes everywhere.
I can imagine you have a fascia to that as well.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And again, starting with the onset of COVID, I began going deeply back into the anatomy books. And I saw something that had never occurred to me before, which is that all of our ideas about standard anatomy and conventional exercise are derived from dissecting cadavers. All of the focus on individual muscles and joints and parts. Well, one thing that's obvious when you think about it, cadavers don't move. Cadavers don't breathe.
Low rigidity there.
Yeah, more than a little rigidity.
Yeah. Not great models. Yeah.
The new paradigm that Feldenkrais was intuiting and that current science is developing much more thoroughly is of the body as a dynamic system. And again, even a slight movement of my hand involves some change in muscle tone and activity in the shoulder and right down to the pelvis, what physiotherapists call the kinematic chain. And every movement involves how I'm relating to the ground and the forces of gravity and the ground reaction with each step. And so FlexAware is my way of taking all of this and making it very immediate and concrete. And the simple example is to just notice how you breathe. So when people talk about breathing, typically the emphasis is almost entirely on the diaphragm going up and down or the belly going in and out. But if you look at your young child, or if you even touch your ribs while breathing fully, you can feel that there's movement in the sides and in the back. And so what I do in every introductory FlexAware lesson is just imagine that your ribs are like fingers, and exhaling is like squeezing a sponge, and inhaling is releasing the sponge. The elasticity of the tissue expands and air is drawn in to fill that space. Again, with the onset of COVID, it was shocking to me that with all the bad news about breathing and breathing-related disorders and COVID symptoms, there were many news features on TV and the radio about so-called healthy breathing. And they would talk about breathe like your belly is a balloon, or breathe like expanding your belly, or sense the diaphragm moving up and down. And I found myself routinely screaming at the radio or the TV saying, no, the whole trunk is moving. Breathing involves movement. Each rib meets one or two vertebrae with one or two or three joints. And so healthy breathing involves increasing mobility in all of those costovertebral joints, seeing the spine as a dynamic system, allowing the whole spine to work more harmoniously so that any tightness is released and any neglected muscles are reintegrated. So again, in introductory FlexAware, I tell people to think of the movement of the ribs in all around. And I'll often show people an anatomy chart that illustrates that. And we begin to move with the breathing. So as you exhale, turn like you're wringing out a sponge. As you inhale, face forward. Alternate left and right. And guiding people to do that with more variety, more playfulness, more awareness of the large muscles at the pelvis and hip joints. Imagining the many small muscles along the spine.
Because we were taught to specialize, whether through sports or PE, or we sit in chairs all day on our computer, we don't actually move at all. So there's some muscles that seem to be more active based on what we do, and some not active because we don't do much. Do you find it difficult? Do you find class years find it difficult to engage certain muscles as opposed to others?
And that's because I don't talk about specific muscles. I'm always guiding people to be more aware of the whole body and your orientation to space and how you're aligning with gravity, seeking to disperse every effort so that muscles everywhere work harmoniously. And again, it's a paradigm shift, and following the wise example of young children, the learning process is guided always by comfort or discomfort. And the learning process is always impelled by curiosity. So encouraging people to be more curious about what's actually happening. And can you sense the changes as you shift your weight and as you move your eyes?
I'm going to offer a different, the mind-body split for a moment. I know you integrate them, they're integrated in your system, but as trained as a therapist, somatic trained, I want to pull out a piece of the human system and ask this question. And I know this is for conversation's sake. I believe I know in your system, we don't do that divisional stuff. I can imagine, psychologically speaking, as someone engages with their whole system and gets freed up and moves according to great, how we've evolved to move, psychology, whether it's cognitive agility, emotional, emotions, energetics of the body, those kind of things start adjusting too, and can begin to reflect the freedom that you have in the physically in the system.
Yes.
Psychologically as well. Can you speak to that?
Yes. And when I was first writing Awareness Heals back in the mid-90s, and ever since, I systematically taught myself to avoid or delete those tricky 4-letter words, mind and body.
Yeah.
And to always look at the whole person. So every experience of stress, anxiety, depression involves some disturbance of breathing. And the cliche in all the books about the body and somatic psychology is of the depressed person who's hunched forward and looking down at the ground and shallow breathing. So guiding people to breathe more easily and efficiently immediately brings psychological benefits and a greater sense of ease and freedom emotionally as well as physically.
Yeah.
And again, think about healthy young children.
Right. So, anyone and everyone is a human being, and I'm sure there's animals too, would benefit from the system. But I'm curious, what's the interest in the physical training world, physical trainers, or people who do more fitness oriented stuff, what kind of feedback have you gotten from them in terms of the paradigm that they've been taught in and what you offer to them?
I'm eager to work much more with people who are actively in the physical training world. Actually did 2 lessons recently with someone who's a professional running coach.
Oh, nice. Nice.
And he knows all of the books about running. And he works as an associate of Nicholas Romanoff, who created the pose method.
Oh, I'm just going to ask about, pose. Yeah.
So I asked him about it, and then I read one of Romanoff's books. And pose and all of the other books on running technique that I found mostly ignore breathing. They take it for granted. And they don't fully integrate the action of the feet. And the idea of the arms and shoulders is people think of the arm swinging from this joint where the upper arm bone meets the shoulder blade. But in fact, every movement of the arm also involves the shoulder blade and the collarbone gliding over the ribs. And I have FlexAware practices that specifically teach
nice. And I could imagine too, because you brought up feet. In our industrial, not plus industrial world, we do a lot of things which seem to be counter to how we've evolved in nature, including shoes.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, just struck me. It's like you and I've talked a lot about a wide variety of things, but I don't know if we talked about shoes. Like, what are your thoughts on conventional shoes as most wear them today and the limitations they create in terms of movement?
One of my favorite fitness activities is running barefoot through the grass. And
answer that question.
Nice fields nearby.
Nice.
Problem is when I run barefoot through the field, there would be wasps in the grass. And so I now wear super lightweight, zero heel running shoes.
Okay. Yeah.
And all of my shoes are zero drop, minimalist running shoes, even even dress shoes.
Okay.
But the best thing is to actually be barefoot and to be able to wiggle your toes.
Yeah.
And I have some FlexAware practices that specifically teach that.
Nice. Okay.
Walking and running. And I was telling this running coach that I'm certain that I can help any runner go farther and faster with less effort and quicker recovery afterward through these whole person practices.
Hope he takes you up on the challenging. He brings some clients in.
So
that'd be cool.
Yeah. And running, of course, is part of most sports, basketball, football, soccer, obviously cross country and marathons and such.
And if you suck at the martial arts, run.
Well, my idea is that your fitness practices should be things that you enjoy intrinsically, that you find fun, that you're curious about, that you're eager to enjoy even more and be able to do for many decades into the future. I was recently on a call with some of the researchers in movement science, and we were specifically discussing pitchers in baseball. And there's so many sports that involve throwing, not only baseball pitching, but a lot of the Olympic sports, basketball. And again, people think of the shoulder as just this joint and don't really appreciate how the shoulder movement involves the shoulder blade and the collarbone and the many muscles that are involved there, and not just the large muscles on the surface. And this is the problem with the way people exercise at the gym.
Yeah.
Almost any gym, and you'll see the exercises and the equipment that's designed for the big superficial muscles, like the quads and deltoids and such, trapezius, while almost entirely, or in fact, entirely ignoring the deeper muscles. So I look at muscles as a kind of elastic suit, and bones are hard bits that are embedded throughout that suit. Muscle pulls on or pushes from, pulls from or pushes on. And so the whole system is reconfiguring with every movement.
Right.
And that means the very small muscles along the spine are coordinating with the larger muscles that meet the ribs for breathing and coordinating with the very large muscles that move the arms and shoulders and legs.
I would imagine this also has a positive benefit on organ function
Yes.
because doing those specified muscle contractions, like bench press, push-ups, whatever it happens to be, you kind of get into a very limited movement pattern, which means your organs can't breathe. I know they don't breathe like the lungs breathe, but they do vibrate, not vibrate. They do.
Yes. There's a pulsing action.
Pulsing,
in
thank
all
you,
of the
to
tissues
the
of the
organs.
body.
Yeah, there's a pulsing that if you're contracted to the tight muscles and fascia, you're gonna have a lot less of that pulsing.
Yeah, and getting back to your
Blood
question
flow,
about,
et cetera.
getting back to your question about somatic psychology, I'm one of the pioneers in somatic psychology. Wilhelm Reich used to do forceful massage to get people to release the tight muscles around the ribs. And he would always say that the key to health is to keep your belly soft.
Mm.
Again, we have the socialized idea that you want to have tight, hard abs. You want to have a six-pack. And six-pack abs make it impossible for the ribs to move freely. If you just look at a conventional anatomy book, the abs go from the pelvis to the ribs and breastbone, and the transverse goes around to the spine. So if the abs are overly tight, then the ribs can't move freely, then breathing is inhibited, then people are predisposed, I suggest, to not only back pain, but to emotional difficulties.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So if people are listening to this and like, oh, I want to get his first book, where do they find that? Where can they find your second book when it comes out? So interested in learning just more about your trainings and in your work, your platform. Yeah.
So the simplest thing is to just contact me. So I prefer to work with people in person, and I'm here in Washington, D.C. I am doing individual sessions over Zoom, and I'm planning to do a new teacher education program soon.
Nice.
And my teacher education program, which I've taught a few times pre-COVID, is only 100 hours.
Okay.
So it's very
doable
in terms of time. Almost all yoga teacher trainings, the basics is 200 hours. With FlexAware, you don't have to learn any Sanskrit. You don't have to learn any standard anatomy. And so I find that with 100 hours, I can prepare someone to be an effective teacher and to communicate these ideas effectively and to understand all of the basic practices. So I'm getting ready to redo the FlexAware.com website so people can look there. And there's a lot of good material on the current site. So FlexAware.com. People can email me at steve@flexaware.com.
Awesome.
Awareness Heals is available through Amazon and bookshop.org and generally. And Outgrow Back Pain, at this point, because I don't have a big social media following, I plan to self-publish initially to start getting it out there. And then as I'm educating new teachers, hope that I can build a following and that I can support the new teachers in getting their names and reputations out there. And I'm eager to have teachers who have a variety of backgrounds.
Right.
Brilliant for seniors, for helping seniors prevent falls and recover from any problems. I'm especially eager, as you asked in an earlier question, to work with people who are involved in serious physical training, athletes of any sort, martial artists, anyone really, dancers.
Yeah. I can't imagine anyone wouldn't benefit from this approach. Like, it's awesome.
As I say, this is a new paradigm in the most literal sense of that overused term.
Right.
So looking at the whole person dynamically, and again, I was talking about push-ups, and one of the key insights while writing Outgrow Back Pain is that every cell in your body is always making sense of its immediate environment. So when you're doing push-ups and holding your back rigid, the tissues all along your spine, muscles, tendons, ligaments, fascia, are getting the message, oh, we need to be more rigid, and calcium to make it easier for them to be more rigid.
Interesting. Okay.
The idea with FlexAware is to have simple practices that you can do maybe 5 minutes every hour, or while you're taking a walk, or as you warm up or cool down from any other exercise or practice, to re-educate and reawaken a sense of ease and comfort, such as we all had when we were healthy children.
Right on.
Because if we're not practicing the easy, efficient movements, we are inadvertently reinforcing the habits of straining and stiffening. And I'm suggesting that most of the problems with aging, from back pain to hip and knee problems, to fear of falling, to emotional difficulties, to depression, most of those problems are really just accumulated habits or calcified habits, and all of those problems are reversible.
Nice.
Steve
Shafarman?
Yes.
Thank you. This has been really fascinating. Definitely want to encourage folks to check out your previous book. Look forward to your new book coming out August or September. Check out your website, reach out to them. Plus, if you're in DC for an in-person session. And then also, for anyone who's wanting to become a teacher, definitely check them out and add FlexAware to your portfolio, because it sounds like it's a great foundation for anything else you might be doing, whether it's dance, martial arts, or anything else along those lines. Thank you, Steve.
My pleasure, Michael. This has been great.